Welcome back. Welcome back. We are both smiling, Glenn Johnson and I, on the Manument podcast here on Apple and Spotify and YouTube and also jbezfinancial.com. We're so glad you're tuning in with us here, whichever way you navigated to it. And we would love for you to subscribe and make sure you're getting future episodes and notifications about them. You can start with that just on the podcast tab, jbezfinancial.com. I'm your co-host, Doug Turnbull. The star of the show, though, is the registered investment advisor at Jabez Financial. His practice, ladies and gentlemen, and that is Glenn Johnson. How you doing this beautiful day, sir?
Fantastic and getting better.
I love that you say that. It is so much about mindset. Mindset is such a big part of everything you're part of, Glenn. That's why you have a chapter in Les Brown's book that you authored called The Motivation Manifesto is the name of the book. And there's a link to that on jbezfinancial.com. We have it in the show notes of the description as well. And because of your acuity and things like this, you're, I believe, having an opportunity to speak at a university. Is that right?
Yes, actually, a good friend of mine, Dr. Michael Ferguson, has invited me to come out. He's a professor at Bowling Green University in Ohio, and he's invited me to come out and give a talk to his class on leadership next week. And I'm thoroughly excited about it because it opens up the door to be able to speak into some people's minds that are already open, looking to learn. And at that stage in life, I'll tell you, it's not just when somebody goes to college that they need to have their mind open to get educated so their lives can get better. We need to be able to keep that habit throughout life, even when we're walking into retirement. But it'll be exciting to be able to speak to the college students because at that point, we know we've got an audience that is intentionally looking to learn. They're not just wanting to learn, they're paying to learn.
Yeah.
They're paying for it.
Whether they realize it or not, they are, yes. No, that's a great point. Yes, you have, people, they're younger, right? So they're more likely to retain it, but also they're not just showing up to get a dinner or something like that. They're paying to be there. But on that note, you get out in the community, whether it's with your Manument Foundation, and you actually have a seminar coming up specifically related to finance. So when and where is that?
Yeah, well, that'll be held at Philomena's in Waterford on March 4th and 6th in the evening. So if you wanted to contact me at the office at Jabez Financial to find out if, I don't want to say qualify to come, but if it's appropriate for you.
If it makes sense.
If it makes sense for you to come, that's right. Because in every teaching environment, it's you're teaching different information, and you want to make sure it's going to the right people at the right time.
Well, 100% right. Yeah, you don't want just people coming to get a free meal, but at the same point, you want to make sure you're reaching people that could be a good fit. So if you want to go to jbezfinancial.com and contact them or give the office a call, 860-390-0093. And they can get you fixed up for that. Again, that event, March 4th and 6th. So right around the corner by the time you are hearing this. Now, today, I want to say our past episodes, we talked about making the right financial priorities. You talked so much about planning and being proactive, Glenn. And then also you talked about reasons there may or may not be an economic downturn. So check those out. Again, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all the places you might catch your podcast. Today, we really begin. It's kind of a two-part series, and it's today's episode on planning a vision for the future. And I think it's so important to plan. Look, we're in the second month of the year. Most people have already trashed their New Year's resolution plans. I know you're not a huge fan of a lot of the kitschy stuff like that, but we have audio from Pat Summitt, the legendary and late University of Tennessee women's basketball coach, and about her son missing the basketball team, not making the basketball team. So here's how the interaction with him went when he came home and she got the news.
Well, my first thought is what coach in East Tennessee would cut my son. If you wear out both those basketballs, I promise you, I guarantee you will make the team next year. Do you hear me? And he goes, yes, ma'am. And I said, well, then let's get it done. And he goes, Mom, will you help me? I said, son, I will help you, but I will not start your engine. You must start your engine every day.
What great advice, huh? This legendary coach says, hey, I'm willing to help you, Glenn, but you got to start your own engine. I can't do that for you. I think that's a great entree into this conversation about having a vision and a plan for the future. So walk us through your ideas there and your 3 tips for doing that.
Well, Doug, just this morning, before I came into the office to get going here with you, a young man from church, he invited me out for breakfast because he wanted to sit down and have a conversation. You know, and here's another thing: just like those students at Bowling Green that they're paying to get educated, it's worth it to get wise counsel from somebody to spend time with them. And so he invited me out for breakfast and bought me breakfast, which I appreciate, and that was great. But we got to talk about, now he's early 30s and thinking about how do I take my life to the next level, right? And this morning we were talking about creating that vision. And there's a few components to it, but understanding that where the mind is, the body will eventually end up. So if we want things to improve, we have to change our mindset from what we're looking at every day to get familiar with where we want to be. You know, and I asked, and it's a good question, like ask yourself, if you had to describe your day, like when you wake up in the morning, what side of the bed do you get out of? Could you right? Could you describe your walk to the bathroom? Do you know where the sink is? And or can you describe when you walk down the hall to go into the kitchen for breakfast? You know, you can really visualize what your day and what your mornings traditionally look like, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the idea is you want to have that clear of a vision of what you want to have happen. What would you like your house to look like? What kind of experiences do you want to have? What kind of breakfast do you want to have? What do you want to eat? Who do you want to be with? And be able to really articulate it. And the more we can spend time where we want to be mentally, that's how we get there.
Yeah. So spending more time envisioning what we want is the first step in trying to get there. So I guess that would be the first tip, is just like stopping to think about it.
Yes. And that is figure out, you've got to know what you want. And that can be a daunting task, especially as an adult. It's easier as a child because you ask a child, what do you want to be when you grow up? Oh, I want to be a race car driver, a doctor, or a lawyer, whatever. They have these big dreams because they're not held down by all of life's adversities and problems that they're trying to sort out. They have more mental space to dream.
Yeah.
And that's what gets them going. That's what gets them started. And so as adults, even though we're in a far better position to pursue our dreams than children, because we've got resources, we're adults now, we have to be able to take all of life's adversities and distractions and problems and headaches and fires we've got to put out. We've got to be able to mentally set those aside and decide for ourselves, what do we want? What do we want the next stage of life to look like? You know, we spend time as a child figuring out, this is what I want my adulthood to look like. But once we get there, oftentimes we end up trying to just maintain what we have rather than defining what we want next. What do we want our next stage of life to look like?
No, that's a great point. So yeah, just trying to decide what we want. And that is a tough thing to kind of nail down, right? Especially if you're in a time of transition. Maybe, I was at the same job for 20 years up until recently before coming into this job. And once that opportunity is going away, it's like, gosh, what next? It's wide open. Well, what do you want? That's a great point. So tip number one is just trying to know what you want beforehand. What else do we have as far as your advice in planning a vision for the future?
Well, a lot of times when I sit down and meet with somebody, their step one, because they're so overwhelmed with what's currently going on and concerns about the future, it's hard to get there. So how do you get that vision? A lot of times the first step that people want to take when asked, what do you want? They want to eliminate pain. They want to eliminate worries and concerns. They want to eliminate uncertainty. They don't want to lose what they've lost. It's coming from a perspective of concerns about what they just don't know about. And they've worked so hard. You've accumulated a significant amount of assets at this point, and you don't want to lose it. And they are correct in recognizing the real need to be able to preserve what they've created. So step number one would be to establish a defense so that you don't lose. That's number one. Number two would be, imagine what would success look like, 5 years from now, 5 years into retirement. You've got to know what that success is what it would look like, and how's that going to make you feel once you get there. Because
what success looks like. I like.
Yeah, you got to know what it looks like, and also how you're going to feel, because your quality of life is determined by what you think about and how you feel about it. So we want to find out, well, do you want your retirement years to be that of lots of travel and adventure, or do you want to be able to stay closer to home and enjoy the grandkids? What
Right.
are you looking for, an adrenaline rush, or are you looking to just enjoy the love and joy of your family and friends? So we want to know what, and then once you know what that is, then you get into step 3, which is getting the education you need to implement the right plan. And a lot of times, sometimes people say, well, I just want to be told what to do. This is what I want. What do I have to do? Well, the underlying component of that is they want to get educated on what they need to do, because they're in the driver's seat. You're in the driver's seat of where you're headed in life. So the next stage of your life, your future, you're in charge of it. And if you're behind the wheel, you need to know how to drive. That's what a driving instructor isn't there to drive your car for you. They're there to teach you how to drive.
Sure. They're there not to start your engine for you. Back to that, okay? Like
That's right.
You got to sign up for the driving class yourself and then actually do the things. They tell you how to do them. So this really is interesting, and I think of so many ways this could go. You mentioned traveling, right? Let's say you're someone that you had a really demanding job, and maybe kids or amount of pets or whatever it is, pre-retirement kept you from traveling that much. And then you want to pivot into retirement. You're going to now not have the regular paycheck, at least from before. Of course, you want to get with someone like you, Glenn, and build that retirement income. But now you're going to go into retirement. There's a chance that your lifestyle living costs could even go up if you want to go from almost zero travel, just as one example, to traveling 6 times a year. And you have to budget for those things. Like you said, it's number one tip: establish that defense, figure out a way to not lose, establish a way that when you go through this plan, you don't lose out. Number 2, determine what success look like. I want to go on 6 trips, 3 international. Okay. And then step number 3 is get educated on how to implement that. And so we rest there and pivot to you, Glenn. If someone's hearing this and they're like, hey, I need this education. I have not been talked about my finances this way. I've been told just a 4% rule, or I saw a YouTube video somewhere that said a thing, and they need something more personalized. How do they get in touch with you, and what is that first conversation like?
Right, because we don't want to take just a cookie cutter approach. A cookie cutter approach leads to mediocrity. You may get closer to the way you want to live, but you'll never actually get there. It'll maybe put you in the ballpark. So yes, there's some cookie cutter rules that you want to allocate properly and that sort of thing. However, it does come down to specifics. For example, when somebody says, I want to retire, I want to travel. Okay, well, what does that mean? Do you want to go on cruises? Do you want to take flights to desirable destinations? Do you want to get an RV and travel across the country? I mean, travel is, there's
different
all
budgets.
kinds of travel.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you want to travel? How often? Where do you want to go? Who do you want to see when you get there? What experiences do you want to have? What kind of memories do you want to create? And it's like, oh, geez, I hadn't thought about all of this. In 5 years from now, it'll be 5 years from now. Right. And so
Last I checked.
And when the opportunity comes to be able to take those trips, by the time opportunity comes, it's too late to prepare.
Yeah.
So let's spend some time now, even though we may be in the midst of the last few years of our career before retirement, and we know retirement's right around the corner, and we're still saying, all right, I'm just going to hammer this out. I'm going to knock out these last 5-6 years of work. I know retirement's coming, but we do have to carve out a piece of our attention to defining what we want that to look like. And I'll tell you, it's so much fun to go through this with people because it's such a variety of things that people want to do. And when you find out what that is, now we can go about putting things in the right place with the right assignments to produce the results that they can have a realistic expectation of. So now we can look to the future optimistically saying, you know what? I know it's funny. When your next stage of life is properly planned out, you enjoy your current stage that much more.
Sure.
Because you're not worried about it. In fact,
absolutely.
Yeah. And you can tolerate more stress. You can tolerate more hardship because you don't just see the end of the light at the end of the tunnel. You believe it. And so we can mentally take that trip, to where we're headed. Even the hardest of times, joyful.
Yeah. It really does. So if somebody wants to have their tailored conversation with you. I mean, this is all a great framework, but the tailored conversation with you, what's that first conversation like? How do they get in touch?
Well, they can start with calling the office. We've got the number 800-390-0093, or go to jabezfinancial.com. But either way, we've got to send an email, pick up the phone, call the office, reach out. We've got to have some sort of initiation, and just like that clip earlier, that I can't start the car for you. And and you can't steer a parked car. You got to get moving. And so reach out and understand that when somebody calls the office and they'll initiate a first dialogue, a first conversation, you can trust that that's not a commitment, that you're not in that. At that point, you're not making a long-term commitment to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. That's kind of like a first date in the sense that let's just introduce each other, have it come into the office, have a cup of coffee, have a conversation. And if it works out that we say, hey, you know what, we would enjoy seeing each other regularly as we go through the next decade or decades together. Great. If not, no big deal.
Right. No, I think that's great. So it's basically no strings attached, complimentary call with you, Glenn, and or contact with you, Glenn. Go to jabezfinancial.com and see if you are both a right fit for each other. It's not just a one-way street there. Same with going to the seminars and everything else. Glenn, there's so much here to digest. Really, all of this sets us up for our next episode, which is going to be about adjusting one's financial sails, like sails of a sailboat. So I'm looking forward to hearing that. Thank you so much for sharing this, Glenn, these 3 tips for starting to chart that vision for the future. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Doug.
The pleasure's mine, too. And thanks to our producer, Daniel Salerson, for getting this published and put out there. And, of course, thank you all for listening to the Manument Podcast. Again, it's out there in all the podcatchers and the podcast page, jabezfinancial.com. Not only are we glad you're hearing it, but if you think someone in your circle needs to, send them the link and be sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications. We will have another episode coming your way here shortly. He is Registered Investment Advisor Glenn Johnson, and this has been the Manument Podcast. Again, have a great day.
Investment advisory services offered through Jabez Financial, LLC, a registered investment advisor firm. Registration is not an endorsement by securities regulators. By contacting us, you may be provided with information about insurance products, including annuities, offered through Glenn Johnson, Connecticut Insurance, license number 4628409. The firms are separate entities. Annuity guarantees rely on the financial strength and claims-paying ability of the issuing insurance company and are not offered by Jabez Financial, LLC. Read your contract for restrictions, limitations, or penalties. Jabez Financial, LLC is not licensed in all 50 states. To find out if Jabez Financial, LLC is licensed in your state, please call 860-390-0093.